Respected Ms. Monica Halanji, members of the staff, and dear students, today is the 4th day of Navratra. So let's start with a shlok. Om Sarvamangal Mangalye Shive Sarvartha Sadhike Sharanye Trayambake Gauri Narayani Namaste. I'm very happy that we have with us Ms. Monica Halanji, who is consulting editor and part of leadership team at Mint, the most popular financial daily in India. She is a certified financial planner. She has served as editor of Outlook Money and worked in some of the India's top media organizations, including the Indian Express, the Economic Times, and Business Today. She has run 4 successful TV series around personal finance advice on NDTV, Zee, and Bloomberg India, and is a regular speaker on financial literacy, regulation, and consumer issues in retail finance. She is a member of SEBI's Mutual Fund Advisory Committee and has served on 4 government committees as well. Dear students, you would find her most of the times that very active on the Twitter, and we come to know the columns that are published in Mint, and there is so much always to learn from her. Then she has been always very kind, and there have been some other webinars where she speaks and educates people on how they should manage the personal finance, particularly the world which is getting more and more materialistic. She has a special affection for our university, Banasthali Vidyapeeth. She visited here and then encouraged her team members to visit Banasthali and write a story. And it was a fabulous and a very big story on Banasthali, which the Mint carried, and all credit to our Monica ma'am who could do this. She also wrote an article on Banasthali immediately after she went back to Delhi after visiting Banasthali. And she has been helping the students in all the ways possible. There is a young women in investment program about which she told us, and then mentored us, and thereby a good number of students have been selected. And ma'am, one student was even working in Morning Star, as I told you last time. So we have our utmost gratitude to her always, and it would remain. Now, we are very thankful to her that she kindly consented to be the chief speaker of this webinar. Her book, Let's Talk Money, is a revolution. It is being read by everyone in India and definitely abroad as well. And we thought that we should consider it to be a part of our textbooks when it comes to personal finance. And when our board of studies met and we discussed a few books over there, everyone said that this is the first book we should ask the students to read because of the nature of the course. And thereby, the students have started reading. And some days before, I requested Monica ma'am that, ma'am, your students, I said your students because they are reading from our book. So you are their teacher, ma'am. So your students have a request if you could conduct a webinar. And I am very much thankful to you, ma'am. You are very much pressed for time, but you know, immediately you could just see your calendar and could freeze what could be the date and the time. I'm grateful to you for this. And now I request Ms. Monica Halanji to please address our bright students and members of the staff.
Thank you so much, Dr. Purohit. You've said a lot of things about you know, what I have done and what I have contributed, but I think it's been the failure of maybe the mainstream media, that the achievements of this university and the kind of work which has been ignored. So I think there is a bias towards a certain kind of institution, a bias against a certain kind of an institution. And possibly Banasthali has suffered because of that. So it was really my privilege that you know, you invited me, and you know, I made the trip. And what I saw over there in terms of what the girls are doing and what kind of facilities are being provided to the girls, it really, I was overwhelmed and very, very deeply humbled. because big city people have a very, what shall I say, arrogant attitude towards what happens outside of the spotlight. So truly, it was my privilege to be introduced, and later I found out from my family that one of my great aunts had actually passed out from Banasthali many years ago. And that came to me when I was talking about Banasthali as if it was something I had discovered. So somebody said, yeah, that aunt graduated from there, so what are you telling us? You are convent educated people, you are now telling us. So it is deeply humbling. And whatever little that I can do to support the girls, I am always available. So all the girls who are listening in, I'm very easily accessible and very, very happy to help all of you ahead. So maybe some of you have read the book, maybe not, but I would just take the next 15-20 minutes to go through a short presentation where I want to talk about 1 minute. I will just share the okay. So we will just go quickly through this one PPT, and it is extremely relevant for the girls that we understand about money, because you see there is so much pressure on a woman to keep it all together. So this is it's a Western image, but when we do the same image in India, we show a woman with 8 or 10 arms, one which has a computer, one has a balan, one has a kid, one has clothes, one has something else. So the pressure is that you can do everything, and you should. And the expectation from the men in your life is restricted to them helping out rather than it being an equal partnership. So this whole thing of looking good, keeping it all together, that entire burden comes onto the woman, that being a superwoman is actually not an option. That's what women do. So that is one conditioning that we grow up with. And the other conditioning has been that science and maths are really not things that girls do. In the 70s, there was this Barbie doll in the US. When she spoke, she would say things like, math is hard, algebra is hard, let's go shopping. Again, it's a reinforcement of this idea that numbers, maths, money is not something that women should bother their pretty little heads about. And academic papers after this doll showed that enrollment in maths and science actually fell post this. So they had to phase this doll out because there is a whole conditioning that women undergo. And so you grow up like that, and then you begin to say that I have no head for numbers, I can't manage money, I don't know enough, my husband, my brother, my father manages it for me. And we put ourselves last rather than looking after this. So women tend to just sort of stay afloat, whereas men do well because, you know what? Women hand over the power to them, especially in marriages where most of the nurturing, the housework comes onto the woman. However much we may want to pretend that it doesn't, it does. And the one job that a man is happy to take over is managing money and assets. And women are so overburdened with trying to work outside the home and inside the home that they give that power away and allow them to take all the decisions. Now, that's not a bad thing that they manage most of the money, decisions, and all the running around for it. But women at least need to know what is happening and need to be an equal participant, because longevity says that women outlive men, and women become that last intergenerational wealth transfer conduit. So assets should actually pass through them, but they don't. So there is a whole discourse of not allowing assets to come into the hands of women, because when the girls are married off, there is a gift, whatever you can call it, is given. And in the in-laws' house, the assets are passed from father to brother to son. Women usually are completely left out, whatever the law may say. The practices are that women don't really get hold of assets. So if you then deconstruct the attachment to gold that women have, then it becomes a perfectly rational decision for women who have no financial assets. This becomes their emergency fund. This becomes their retirement plan. This becomes their widowhood or the divorce plan, because this is something that they can wear, they can hide away, they can put into a locker. That becomes their wealth. So women actually are very smart. They have learned that because they're out of the whole asset game which the men play, this is that one way to hold financial security. So don't let anybody tell you that women are not smart. They are very smart. It's just that education hasn't happened, and I'm glad to find that Banasthali is actually doing that. So that's as far as the context of women and money goes. But there's a broader context in which I think we need to think about money, that we've, as a country, we've had a very difficult relationship with money. We've been desperately poor for centuries because of the invasions, because of the colonial rule. The wealth that was has got depleted. And if there is no chance of making money, of being wealthy, of having a good life, then it's easier to take a high moral ground and say that पैसा ganda hai, हाथ का मैल hai, the filthy rich. So you can put moral values onto the people who are rich. And because you know there is no hope of attaining that, it is easier to say we don't want it. So we've actually given Lakshmi away, we've given the wealth away to say that there is no good way to acquire wealth, only the bad guys have wealth. And I just want very quickly to take you through how Bollywood has depicted this and how that has changed over the last few decades. So immediately after independence, the rich guy was this evil moneylender. And he used to prey on the poor for everything, for money, for life, for honor, everything. And he was rich, rest, all the village was poor. By the 70s, the rich guy is that smuggler. He's smuggling gold, he's smuggling charas, he's doing all of that. The good guy doesn't have Gadi Bangla Daulat, he has Ma. You know, again, that high moral ground, and I'm poor, but I have my mother. The rich brother is rich because he's a bad guy. So that's your 70s. By 80s, early 80s, it's beginning to change. And remember, this is just post the nationalization. India took a socialist turn. As a country, we got socialist and secular words put into our preamble by Indira Gandhi in the late 70s. We didn't start off by being a socialist economy, but it was introduced. And the whole bank coal mining nationalization is happening in the late 70s. So Kala Patthar again is epic movie where the rich coal miner, the owner of the enterprise, is this evil guy who's again preying on the lifeblood of the miners who go into the dark caves to extract black coal. And but the nature of the poor guy is beginning to change. So you have a far greater idea of what your rights could be and what you can do. That is your 80s. And then 91, there is liberalization. It's a whole new change which has happened in the economy. It takes 10 years, but it starts to reflect in Bollywood. And this Dil Chahta Hai was again this seminal movie which showed wealth in an average house as a backdrop. The main actor, the woman actor, is shown drinking wine, but she's not a prostitute or a bad girl. That's what lifestyle is about. They're traveling abroad. It's not a big deal. It's part of the background. You know, so they don't make a big evening in Paris kind of big deal about going abroad. And there's a whole new attitude towards money. And then you have Gully Boy, just a few years ago. And here there is the slum boy who wants it all. He says, "Apna time aayega." And he doesn't want it for a ailing mother, doesn't want it for a marriageable age sister. He wants it for himself. So there's a whole change in the approach towards money. Money is now becoming an aspirational thing. Somewhere we're coming out of this tamas into rajas, and where we are emerging, the rules, the way that we look after that is still very old. So there is a new desire for a better life. and we want to do it the right way. We want to pay our taxes. We don't want to be smugglers and evil people. And we are believing that, yes, good work can also make you rich, but the way that we manage our money is still very 1970s. So, hum hai naye, to andaz kyun hai purana? And with that, very quickly, and most of you have read the book, so I'm not going to spend too much time. I'm going to just breeze through this. Is that we need different rules of money. And the key parts of this is we need a cash flow system in place. You have read the book. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. That enables us to separate out spending from saving. We need an emergency fund. That's the first financial product we buy. We don't start by targeting retirement. We start by being very practical and having a stash of cash which we can use in an emergency. Most importantly, insurance is not investment. And I've spent some time in the book on this. All that I want you to see is that it's a trap, because the agent, it's a 15, 20-year product. In the first year, the agent is getting on 1 lakh premium, he's getting between 35,000 to 42,000, because that's the commission rate. From the second year, his commission is dropping to 7.5%. So the incentives are aligned for him to sell you the first one and then try and get you onto another plan after a couple of years. And what do you get if you stop paying? Suppose you pay the first and you don't pay the second premium. The rules allow the company to keep all the money. You get nothing back. If you pay for 2 years and you don't pay a third premium, of 2 lakh, you get 60,000 back. And this is all part of regulation. They're not doing anything wrong. The regulator allows them to do this. You pay for 3 years, you don't pay the fourth. Out of 3 lakh, you get just about 1 lakh back. Now you've paid 5 premiums. You don't want to pay the sixth. You get only 2.5 lakh back. So it's a trap. And this is what the red line shows, what you get back if you stop paying any time till the end of the policy. Right? The insurance company is always, it's a capital loss for you. At the end of the term, you get a 3% average annual return. So it's really struck, the product is designed to destroy household savings. I call it life insurance products are where Indian household savings go to die, because very few people actually are able to benefit from it. So again, the book has the material on what you should buy. The fourth rule is real estate is not a sure win. You have to get real about it. It's a very difficult, clunky asset. It still needs black money. White deals are possible, but not that many. We don't count the full costs of real estate. And the way to do investments in real estate is to understand this concept called yield, which is annual rent divided by the capital value. And anything less than 4, you should just walk away from the deal with investment in mind. If it is more than 4, it begins to get interesting. So real estate is not a short deal. It has a liquidity problem. It's not a good asset to have for an emergency. And the last rule is you must have equity allocation. You must have exposure to equity of your money. This just shows you how 1 lakh invested in 1980-81 has grown over the last 40 years. When you look at gold, PPF, fixed deposit, those are the 3 lines at the bottom of the screen. And that's the value of the Sensex. If 1 lakh had been left in the Sensex, that is where, and it reached, that dip you see is March. And what you see is data till about July. It's gone up even further. Markets go up and down. We don't know what it does short term, but long term, you see the kind of wealth building capacity that the market has. This is a shorter cut of time. Gold is beginning to do better when times are in distress, but when things go back to normal, then gold prices sink again. Markets are volatile. We only see it when the markets are going down and we get afraid. And when markets are going up, we think now it's too late. But what we need to understand is that we are not speculators, we are investors, we are long-term investors. We want to buy the Sensex. So this tells you how long is long-term. So people who are doing maths will understand that this is rolling returns. Even if you haven't done it, that's fine. Essentially, what it's saying is that the longer you hold the market index, the greater are the chances of a no loss. And the average return over 7 to 10 years has been in the Indian market about 13 to 14%. So equity exposure through an index fund is your first starting introduction to equity, not direct stocks, not managed funds, because even for that you need to know a lot before you actually choose a scheme out of all of the mutual funds available. But an index investing allows you to take a very low risk addition to your portfolio of equity at a very low cost. So we definitely need equity exposure at all times. There is no time to come into the market. We are not speculators. You're always in the market, but you're riding very, very long term. And as your goals come near, you're redeeming before that. So even a person who's 70 has a part of his or her portfolio in equity. And women, and this is to all you girls who are doing the course and are wondering whether it is only for your own self or can you make a career out of it. What I can tell you is that India today is at $2,000 per capita income. We are on our way to becoming a $5,000 per capita income. It may take years, it may happen faster. With all this reform that we are seeing right now, my own judgment is that it will happen sooner than later. And as a country onboards formal finance, you need planners that you can trust. You need financial planners that you can trust. And women make excellent planners, because once they understand that finance is not tough, we are not looking at derivatives, we're not looking at cryptocurrencies, we're looking at onboarding people away from their real estate, gold, FD, life insurance products into a new way of managing money. So if you look at it not in terms of maximizing, getting that highest return, which is out there in the market, to having a plan so that your life goals are met, so that transitions in life stages are smooth, so that you don't have to look at prices of either gold or oil or stock market as they rise and fall. I mean, you should, as professionals, your clients, if you're their planner, should not need to call you and say, market has fallen, what I should do. Your communication, your handholding is so strong that they know that there's a good plan in place and I don't really need to worry. And women have a way of understanding problems and events which are not that well articulated, but they have that subtle sense of understanding issues which are deeper. And a lot of money issues really have to do with deeper issues of emotions, of family politics, of desires, of power play within family members. Women, I think, they catch those subtexts, the subtle messages far better. And they're able to empathize far better with a family as it comes in as clients to do their planning. So as planners, I would actually, tell you that start your own practice. So get experience somewhere, but start your own practice. If by your late 20s, early 30s, you start your practice, it will take you 5 to 7 years. So it's a very slow initial return business. But once you get established, it'll be like a doctor's or lawyer's practice. It's a lifelong expanding annuity, because through word of mouth, your clients will bring in more clients who will bring in more clients. And you have the life cycle of asset wallet share with you because of trust. Financial planners, I know, are invited to all the important events in the house, births, weddings, new house, deaths, everything. You become a part of the life of your clients. And women are the best placed to take this up as a career, because you have the skills, you have the empathy, and you have the patience to allow this business, allow this practice to grow slowly over time. So I'm going to stop right now and hand it back to Dr. Purohit as soon as, yes. and I'm happy to answer all the questions.
I think it's a fabulous way to brief our students about the foundations of money management and what things to be kept in mind throughout the journey of personal finance. And also a very good idea the students now have about making career as a personal financial planner and what kind of privileges the personal financial planners they enjoy. So that's great. And now coming to the questions, so I request our panel of students led by Ms. Vaishnavi, student of BBA 5th semester. Vaishnavi, are you ready with the questions?
Absolutely, sir.
Okay, so you can go ahead with the questions. You have your friends also along with who will be asking questions.
Yes, sir.
Can you just introduce them as well? And then you can start.
Yes, sir. So, namaste, ma'am. This is Vaishnavi Tripathi. And with me in the panel is Sneha Anand and Yashika Sridhar. So, we would be asking you the questions. So, my first question to you is, ma'am, your book emphasizes a lot upon diversification of our investment. So, please, could you tell us a few tips to diversify smartly and what are the benefits of it?
Thank you so much, Vaishnavi. Diversification, I love to explain it with a food analogy that if you were to just eat pizza all day or just carbohydrates, you just eat roti, you just eat one part of food, it's not good for the body. So Indian food is supposed to be very good. You know, when we think of a thali meal in India, it has everything. It has carbohydrates, it has protein, it has minerals, it has greens, it has sweet, it has curds, it has a pickle for the kicker, taste kicker. So it's a complete meal. So when you think of a thali, that's a diversified meal. A similar thing happens when you think of your financial life. You don't need just equity, which is it gives you growth. You also need safer products like debt, which is fixed deposits, PPF, your PF, a certain kind of bond funds to give that stability. And also, when you are targeting a goal which is nearby, you need certainty that the money is there. So, gold is an inflation hedge. It's also a good emergency fund because it's so liquid. You can sell a part of it. You can sell a gram. You don't need to sell like real estate. You don't need to sell the whole house. You can only sell 5 grams of gold if you need that much money. So different pieces of your portfolio actually do different things for you. The way that products have been sold, they've been sold on return, that this gives a good return. I think return is a second attribute. First is, do I have the assets? Do I have the products that I can sell quickly when I need the money? So it begins by asking the question, how far are my goals? So most people will have short, medium, long-term goals. And then you think of your asset allocation to say that for goals which are near term, I need certainty. I need 100% certainty that 6 months later, the fees that I need to fill for my child who's overseas or the new car that I want to buy is definitely there. So that's either a liquid fund or a fixed deposit. It's sitting there to be redeemed and used. Slightly further away, even till 3 years, you can take a little bit more risk on your bond fund. And beyond 3 to 5 years, you're looking at a much heavier equity allocation. So diversification really is about having different pieces of different assets in your portfolio so that when asset prices rise and fall, they balance it out. So for instance, earlier in March this year, equity markets crashed by 30% over a week. Now, people who had a good asset allocation, had diversified portfolios, didn't see a 30% drop in their portfolios because they had a sizable part of their assets in debt, which is PF, PPF, FTs, and bond funds. The purpose of diversification is that you're not overexposed to one asset class. most times asset classes move in opposite directions. So when equity was falling, gold was rising. So even if you had a 10% allocation, your entire net worth would not have dropped by 30%. So people with good diversified portfolios will not see either the highs when markets go up, nor will they see the huge drops when markets go down. You get more balanced returns through it. So that's the purpose of diversification.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would hand over the mic to Yashika Sridhar for the next question.
Thank you, Vaishnavi and sir, for giving me such a great opportunity. Namaste, ma'am. I would like to ask you a question. Being students, we get some pocket money. How should we start investing and managing our finance ourselves?
Yashika, very nice question. I think
Thank you, ma'am.
Very limited resources right now. So I would rather practice separating out savings from spending. So yes, pocket money is very small. Your goals right now would be not to get into debt, which means take loans on credit card, or right now there are a lot of apps which give you loans. So just stay away from those loans, because I don't know if anyone of you has taken loans online through those apps, but please stay away. So that's your first step. Of course, you have to only spend what you have. It's okay at the moment to spend, the pocket money that you're getting, because usually it's very small. But it's not a bad idea to start having a process in place. Suppose you're getting 100, of putting 5 or 10 away. Okay, just 5 or 10 rupees out of 100, just so that you start falling into the habit of separating out your spending and saving. And it's, at this stage, if you don't understand mutual funds, it's okay to use a recurring deposit in a bank. It's okay to use a fixed deposit in a bank. If you do understand products like mutual funds, then of course you can start experimenting with putting it in a liquid fund. And as you get more confident, you can start looking at an ETF or an index fund to park that money for your long term. But essentially, just to stay out of debt and practice separating spending from saving.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I am handing my mic to Sneha Anand.
Namaste, ma'am. It's a huge opportunity to see you in live and all. Ma'am, my question is, if I want my parents to do better financial planning, how they should choose the right financial advisor? Because some may work with a hidden agenda.
Right, Sneha. Sneha, moving your own family for financial planners and people who write on finance is pretty much the toughest thing, because most people sort of don't believe really that there can be another way, and you sort of dismiss your own family as, yeah, they're doing something. And this is a conversation I've had with established planners, that their own family is the last to put their finances in order, because they just don't seem to believe that this is going to work. But it's a great idea to encourage your parents to move to a planner. Unfortunately, we don't have any planner ratings right now, but it's a good idea to find a planner who's recommended by some friends or family. So just as, how do you find a doctor? How do you find a lawyer? You go through somebody. You don't Google them. You get introduced to them by somebody. So ideally, try and find someone who has worked with a planner. That's your first. Suppose you can't do that. Suppose, in a town, there aren't that many planners. But, there are people offering wealth management and all that. So maybe start talking to 3 of them at least. If they're not starting with your goals, your family situation, if they're starting by saying, how much do you want to invest? That's not a planner. That's a seller. It's an agent. A planner the kind of first conversation that a planner will do, most people will think he's a counselor, because he's going to ask about the family, about the children, about parents, grandparents, what you want out of life, where do you see yourself going? These are the things people do in, spiritual discourses, that where do you want to go? So a good planner will actually not talk about money at all in the first meeting. He's going to talk about what are your goals for the kids. Very, very different conversation. It's about a whole life. Rather than saying, I have 5 lakh, tell me which stock or fund to buy. That is not a planner. So you get a sense of what the planner is bringing to the table. He should be talking of insurances, of a life insurance cover, of a medical cover. He should be talking about a short, medium, long-term allocation of goals and then products. So if he's starting from goals and working his way or her way back to products, that's the planner. If he's simply saying small cap is doing well, let's do small cap. Just run, because that's last year's winner and you don't want to lose money. So unless you get a good recommendation, these are some of the questions to ask, Sneha.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I hand over mic to Vaishnavi Tripathi.
Hello, ma'am. So my next question is that what are the 5 major common mistakes which people do while investing in shares and mutual funds?
5 mistakes when they invest in shares and mutual funds. The first is to invest in last year's winners. So in 2017, there was a whole run-up in the mid and small cap space. There was, I think, 30-40% returns in a year. And you had people rushing into those products. And then for the next 3 years, there was negative returns. So the first is, don't buy last year's winner. Buy products that suit your risk profile, your asset allocation. So a small cap fund, for instance, is a small allocation in a diversified portfolio. It's not the whole thing. So that is one. Second is not having the patience of riding out a downturn. The equity part of the market is still, people still watch movies like Wall Street and all that and think that they're speculators. But we are not. We earn regular incomes. We're investors. So the second error is to not have the patience when markets fall, of understanding that markets go down and markets go up. It has gone down. It will definitely go back up. So I always say that you need to give equity market the same patience that you give real estate and gold for you to see real returns. The third is to, when you take sudden knee-jerk reactions, especially to a market fall, and sell your entire portfolio. You allow fear to come and take over. And the fourth is when you allow greed to come and take over. When somebody calls up and says there's a hot tip, this stock is going to do really well, so-and-so is buying, you should also buy. Or now foreign funds are doing well because this is happening, that is, so that both fear and greed are terrible emotions to give into where your money is concerned. And the fifth for both mutual funds and stocks, I think would be that we tend to blame ourselves when things go wrong. And we tend to, think that the market is moving because I have bought. Okay, we sort of personalize what is happening. The markets are very large and deep. Your 1 lakh investment is going to make no difference. It's not as if you make the 1 lakh investment, market falls. It has nothing to do with you. So people tend to personalize both wins and losses. And they tend to believe that it's their smartness which made them take that right investment decision. And they get overconfident. Or if they invest in markets immediately tank, then they think they are unlucky. So nobody is lucky, unlucky. The unluckiest investor in India 10 years ago, 15 years ago has done well. Okay, even if you bought at the bottom, markets go up long term. Unluckiest investor in the Sensex would have done well. So these are the biases, these are the pitfalls that investors into equity need to be careful about, Vaishnavi.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would request Yashika to ask the next question, please.
My next question to ma'am is, in most of our interviews and even in your books, you have used the mantra Setu Ban between Yogasan and financial fitness. How are they interrelated?
The Say that again. Setu Band between.
Yogasana and financial fitness.
Oh, yogasana and financial fitness. Yes.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
I mean, I am a student of Iyengar yoga, and initially it was really tough. Your body is not used to the discipline that yoga needs you to have. But very slowly you get to know it better. You get to understand how you can breathe, how you can relax certain muscles, and how you can actually get into postures. And it brings a whole lot of balance in your life. Financial planning is very similar. When you start, it's very difficult. You don't know the terms, you don't know what duration means in bond funds, you don't know what credit risk is, you don't know what a PE ratio is, you don't know much. But your body is going to be till the end. You need to look after it through yoga. Your money is going to be with you till the end. You need to look after it. So if you're doing something for physical fitness, you need to do something for your financial fitness. So I see the uh, links between the two very, very clearly, that this is also a yoga, and you don't have to, again, either become a marathon runner, which means you don't have to become a winner, a mover dealer in the stock market, and you just need enough so that you're fit. Your money, life is in place, so that the things that you enjoy doing, whether it's working or whatever else, you are free to do. So the purpose of money is to give you choices and allow you to do the things that you want to do. So money is not something which is a goal in itself. So your planning actually will teach you that.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I am handovering my mic to Sneha Anand.
My next question is, ma'am, you have been so successful in the world of journalism, corporate monitoring, research, and so on. Who is your role model, ma'am?
Okay, so Sneha, role models actually, go on changing. But I have to say that a big role model has been my mother. And she has managed to do very, very tough things while looking after the house and having a very successful writing career on her own. So that definitely has had a very major impact in the way that I have looked at the world. I think I will broaden the question from here. There hasn't been like a single role model, but I would give a lot of credit to the kind of spiritual philosophies that we in India are so lucky to have around us in our growing up years in every household. We are surrounded by that deeper feeling. And if you just plug into that, it it gives you that anchoring and that stability to go through life, like the Gita says, without getting attached to the fruit and doing something because it is to be done. So that little bit of distance between doing of something for its own consumption and doing it because that is what you are doing now and as an offering. So I think that that deeper philosophy comes in very, very useful, because life has ups and downs. In your professions, you will have a lot of ups and downs. And if you get too attached to something, a job, a title, a particular car brand, a particular dress or something, that attachment actually destroys joy. Because the minute you're attached, you forget why you're doing something, you forget to enjoy what you're doing. So don't misinterpret this to say that there are no goals. Of course, there are goals, but you're not attached to the goal. If it doesn't happen, then you have that internal anchoring to say, oh, okay, so this hasn't worked, let's do something else. So it doesn't hit you that badly anymore. So essentially, the like an index investing, the highs are not so high and the lows are not so low. So I would say that the role model or the path shown is really that the Indian philosophy, which says that work, but don't get attached.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I hand over to Vaishnavi Tripathi.
Ma'am, my next question to you is, even after making a will, there is a probate process, and people can make claims dragging the asset ownership decisions by years. So, is it better to establish private trusts or give the assets while we are alive, while one is
So
alive?
that's a very important question, and a lot of people do pass on without making wills, without indicating what is to be done. Trusts are expensive. An average person may not be able to do it. So you would need lawyers, you will need support to do that. So if there is a certain sizable part of the asset and you want to use the trust, you will need to consult your lawyer. It is not a good idea for parents to hand over assets while they're still alive to their kids, because unfortunately it is money which sometimes will drive relationships. So making a will is a great idea. You may or may not want to tell the beneficiaries what they're getting, because as you age, you get more and more dependent on your children. Handing over assets while you're still alive is not a good idea, which leaves the will, which can go into dispute. So there is a manner in which the will is to be written. You can put in caveats, you can put in provisions that make the will as tight as possible. So it's a good idea to consult a specific will lawyer to put in those provisions so that the scope for dispute is very limited. But I mean, there is a certain provision where if a beneficiary does dispute the will, whatever is left in the will to that person also goes away. So those caveats can actually be put into a will. So this intergenerational transfer of assets is really a difficult process, but writing a very cogent and watertight will is actually a way out.
Thank you, ma'am. I would request the next question.
Thank you, Vaishnavi. My next question to ma'am is, which is better, gold ETF or SGB, that is sovereign gold bonds?
Okay, so sovereign gold bonds is actually a new thing which has come in the Indian markets. And it's the government wanting people to buy paper gold rather than real gold, because real gold, you see foreign exchange going out of the country and it puts a pressure on the fisc. So the government sells these bonds. The only thing is that you don't have liquidity in it. It's a 7-year bond. So that's a demerit. But the merit is that you get an interest, which you don't get in any other gold investment. You get an interest from the government. And when you get your money back, any long-term gains is not taxable. So if you have a 7-year horizon, then definitely the sovereign gold bond is a fantastic option. But if you think that you need the money midway, then the ETF is a better option. Alternatively, if you buy every year and you can ladder it so that every year there is a bond maturing, but still it doesn't take away an emergency need for that money. So either you have a very good 6-month emergency corpus, then you can do the laddering of the bonds. You buy some every year so that it's a whole cycle. Every year one is getting matured. Otherwise, so it could be half and half. You put half in an ETF and you put half in a sovereign gold bond. So it could be a mix of the two.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I am handing my mic to Sneha Anand.
My first question is, I understand that one can start with SIP in equity mutual funds with rupees 500 per month. But what are the common mistakes to avoid while selecting a fund? Because there are many companies that are providing it.
Correct. Yes. And that's the problem of choice, Sneha, that there are so many funds out there. How do you even begin choosing? And in fact, I am writing a book on mutual funds and I'm addressing exactly that question right now. So the answer really is that you're starting from your own needs. So when you go out to buy something, so when you suppose, you're buying, say, coffee, and you go to the supermarket, there are all kinds of coffees. I mean, when you go abroad, there is a whole wall of coffee. What are you going to buy from that? So then you try and see what is it that you want. as a student, I remember in the UK, I had very little money, so I couldn't afford the expensive coffee. So I had a budget in mind. And then I wanted instant because I didn't have time to do brewing and all that. So sort of it reduced the universe of what I wanted. Then out of the 4 or 5 options, I could choose one. So similarly, you'll have to see what is it that you need. And in that, you'll have to see that, how much risk am I willing to take? If it is an addition to my portfolio, then of an existing good portfolio, then I can take a little more risk. If it is the first investment, then I should stay with an ETF or an index fund or a large cap fund or a flexi cap fund. So it sort of reduces your universe according to the existing portfolio and the risk that you can take. So it's pretty much, it has to do with your own risk-taking ability, because different categories, so there are, I think, 14 categories of equity funds, and each of them will do a particular thing. So the category large cap will invest in large cap stocks, mid cap in mid cap stocks. So each category has a purpose. You've got to match your investing desire with that purpose. So a good way is to see the categories and see which one really is answering that question that you have. And then out of that, you look at the well-performing schemes over the last 5 years. And that you can see through either Mint 50, Morningstar, Value Research. So they all have lists, they all have star ratings, and then you choose out of that.
Now I'm hand over to Vaishnavi Tripathi for the next question.
Before I ask the question, ma'am, I would request all the students, the chat box is open, so you may type in your questions and we will be further asking it to ma'am. So, ma'am, my next question is that I want to invest in mutual funds, but I don't know if I should go through e-brokers like Policy Bazaar, as they say they will guide me throughout. Or should I approach the asset managers directly in order to save my extra expenditure on brokers' commission? Neither am I an expert in this field, nor do I want to pay any commissions. So, what should I do?
So, you have platforms like Mutual Fund Utility, MFU, which give you the option of investing into any scheme from any fund online, and it is free, and it has been set up by the mutual fund industry, mfuonline.com or .in. So it's set up by the industry itself. They are equity holders of Mutual Fund Utility, it is called, MFU. So if you are going direct, you can actually use utility to pay that commission gets reduced, your expense ratio is lower. Now, the utility of an advisor or a planner is such that they guide you to pick the schemes that you need at the current stage in your life. So if you are able to get a planner, then you can still buy direct, but you pay him or her a fee. Like you pay a doctor's consulting, a lawyer, so you will pay a flat fee to the financial planner. So that's one route. Then there are other robo-advisors, and there are other online portals, like for instance, there's Scriptbox, which will give you funds in a box. So you just buy a particular box, and they have done their own back testing algorithms, and they keep changing the funds according to market situations. You could do that. There are others. There is Funds India. There are other options out there which will advise you on how to choose the exact fund, and there are subscription models. So it's really how you want to approach it. It may be a good idea to start off by an ETF or an index fund, because you are just buying an index. Okay, there is no choice of fund manager. The problem comes when you want to buy an actively managed fund. So if you're buying just a broad market index just to start testing how a mutual fund works, that's a great idea. And as you get to know more, either you can start choosing on your own or rely on some of these online assistances, or actually then hire a planner to guide you, because this is going to be a lifelong journey. And as your assets and your income increases, the need for a planner is going to come. There'll be a time when you cannot manage it on your own. You will need a planner. So it's a good idea to start looking for somebody who will partner your money life throughout. You pay a flat fee, and you go direct.
Thank you, ma'am. I would request Yashika for the next question.
My next question to ma'am is, if monthly income is 60,000 rupees and risk bearing capacity is low, then which kind of mutual funds are advisable for long term investing?
So, at every income stage, you will get a set of products that you can invest in. If someone's earning, say, 60,000, I don't know what the expenses are, but let's assume that he or she is being able to save an additional 10% of income. And part of the money is already doing, there's already provident fund being cut and tax saving has already happened. And you have an additional, say, sum of 7,000 rupees to invest. As a first exposure to equity, it's a great idea to start an SIP into an index fund on the broad market, because your risk-taking capacity is very low right now. The available surplus is very low. You don't want to put the money to any large risk, and you're new to this part of investing, then an SIP on a broad market index fund, which has a small expense ratio and a very small tracking error, is a great way to start your investing portfolio, Yashika.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I am handovering my mic to Sneha Anand.
Ma'am, the question was asked by Swati Jha. As we are due to COVID, there is downfall in market in the sector. We should investing our money, but as a fresher, we are going for the placement. So what? So after being placed, how we manage our money in the best way after the COVID situation? Because ma'am, there are many sectors which are in their downfalls.
Swati, you're right. There are sectors which are down, but there are sectors which are up. Pharma is up, IT is up, high technology, robotics, artificial intelligence, all of these sectors are up. So if you're choosing sectors, then you need to have that sight, you need to have that foresight to choose those sectors well. But that's the role of an index-based investing system, that the gains and the losses somewhere get cancelled out and you get an average return. And the average return in the last 6 months of the pandemic, markets are up again almost 30-35%. So it is not true that markets have fallen. Markets have in fact risen. There's so much liquidity in the world that all of that is coming into gold, it's coming into stocks. As you start investing, forget about where the market is. Just forget about it. It does not matter, because you're now going to be investing for the rest of your life. And as companies make profits and they're listed, it shows up in stock prices. So it's a great idea to forget where the markets are and just start your SIPs, whatever level the market is. If it corrects, because then your money is buying more. So stop looking at the Sensex every day. Stop watching TV channels which are meant for brokers and not for long-term investors. Have a plan in mind according to which you will invest so much in such product, and stay with that plan.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I will hand over the mic to Vaishnavi Tripathi.
So, ma'am, my next question is that shares facilitate as many times stocks are up, but by 10% in a single day. What sort of advice will you give, ma'am, if students like me want to invest in stock market at a very early age?
So if you want to do day trading, for instance, then you need to understand that you can have gains and you can have huge losses, because day trading then encourages you to do derivatives and you take far more leverage risk. So if it is day trading that you need to do, you need to understand that it's taking time away from your job, whatever it is that you're doing. That day trading, it would mean that you're day trading in office, or you're taking time out of your study time to do day trading. And it is something that will sort of pull you in a lot. So you need to really decide, is that really what you want to do? But if you find that you're really good at day trading, maybe you really have a knack, then that really is the profession for you to go really into fund management, maybe with a mutual fund, a CIO of a mutual fund. So if you find that you really have a knack for this and you're doing very well, then you should maybe take it up as a profession. But for an average manager or a consultant or a teacher, if you're doing day trading, you're taking your attention away from your profession into something which is, it's going to be very volatile for you, because every day there is an up and down, and your focus is really on that and not what you're doing.
Thank you, ma'am. I would request Yashika to ask the next question.
My next question to ma'am is the people with an old school thought invest in property and gold only. Is it relevant in the prevailing scenario, particularly when we witness huge volatility in stocks?
So, like I said, diversification is important. And the volatility in stocks is short term. If you're doing a long term investing, the volatility gets ironed out. So please do read the book, Let's Talk Money. It'll explain how you should think about gold and real estate and stocks, because when you think of stocks, you think of individual stocks. When you think of equity exposure, it's like a far more mature way of investing. And again, just read the book for understanding what problems real estate investing has. And gold is a part of your asset allocation, not the entire pie. So we need to start thinking of and not or. We think of land or stocks, gold or stocks, but it's actually an and. You need everything on your thali meal. You need your proteins, you need carbohydrates. So you need all of that. And we are already over invested into real estate because of that one house that we live in that we have bought. Our allocation is always already quite high. So diversify away from real estate into financial assets, because they are far more easier to handle. There is far less stress when you get in or out. And it's not dependent on a location, because in real estate, it matters today whether you bought in Gurgaon or Faridabad, right? So in Gurgaon, you saw a multiplier. In Faridabad, it wasn't that good. But when you're doing, say, index investing, then it's the market return that you're getting, and no one can really take that away from you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I request Sneha Anand to hand over the mic.
Next question is how to keep yourself motivated if the share we brought are constantly decreasing in price, because it leads to so much of stress.
Yeah, so if you've heard me for the last hour, I'm saying direct stock buying is not for people who don't have knowledge. You need to be able to understand balance sheets, whether Trump will win or Biden will win. You need to understand where oil prices are going. You need to predict where inflation will go in India. You need to predict a whole lot of things. You need to have a view on sectors. I mean, who would have invested in pharma last year because the sector had been in a downturn? So unless you know these things, don't buy direct stocks. Just stay with index investing. So again, my sense from all your questions are you're looking at the stock market as buying a single stock or two stocks. Don't do that. Buy the broad market index, and then you don't need to ask these questions of what happens when my stock goes down. Nothing happens because you are not owning one or two stocks. You're owning the entire index.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I will request Vaishnavi to continue further.
Thank you, Sneha. Ma'am, so my next question is the second last from the panel, and then we'll go for the questions from the attendees. So what are the new and emerging investment options for a person with moderate risk appetite and 5 to 7 year time horizon during the period of COVID-19?
So COVID-19, episodes like COVID-19 will come and go. The new emerging really is the financialization of Indian savings away from gold, real estate. So they remain allocations, but the biggest giving up is of buying bundled life insurance as investment and onboarding mutual funds as investment options. So I think we don't need right now more exotic products. After step would be to stop buying life insurance as investment. Just buy it for a pure term life cover if you have dependents, and then understand mutual funds and buy things which suit you rather than going in for cryptocurrencies or derivatives or anything. Keep it simple, keep it something that you can understand, and keep it so that you don't have to spend too much time every few months in reworking your allocation, reworking your products. If your foundations are strong, then once or twice a year, you can clean out your portfolio to see what is not working and buy that one or two new products. But otherwise, the idea is to keep a system which allows you to do the things in life that you want rather than just worrying about your money.
Insightful, ma'am. The next question, Yashika, please go on.
My next question to ma'am is how do we keep ourselves focused on the money box in the time of information bombarding?
Yeah, that's a really good one, Yashika, because every few days, every few hours, you will get a ping that this is happening, that is happening. You need to have a very strong foundation of knowing what your financial plan looks like. So, it's like a diet. If it's a crash diet, you will get out of it. If you've changed your food habit, then no matter what comes in front of you, it's not your habit to eat that junk. It's not your habit to eat at a non-meal time. It's not your habit to snack. So good weight management, good health fitness is about habits. Your money life is also about a good money habits. So when the distractions come, you're able to turn away because that is not what you need to snack on. You don't need to snack on this new deal because you've got a very good, strong system in place. So it's really changing your money habit. That really is the key.
Thank you, ma'am. Now the panel's questions are finished. Now Sneha will continue with the attendees' questions.
I think I should just chip in here as far as moderating the questions from the students who are quite active on the chat box now are concerned. But I find that a lot of these questions which have been asked, they are already answered when some question was asked by the student panel members. But then, ma'am, there is one question from Pooja Bhardwaj. Can we develop a financial quotient without hailing from a finance background? So, and are there reliable sources from which we can get educated from? So one is, of course, your book.
No, of course. And it isn't that tough, right? So it is, when we think about finance, we are thinking of derivatives, we are thinking of complicated things. But, we've found people who have done extremely well who may have just invested in fixed deposits and gold. So it's really your money habit. What we try and do when we try and introduce things like mutual funds is to make your money a little more efficient. It's not about understanding high finance at all. So it is just common sense. And all that we are trying to do is to onboard you onto a more liquid, lower cost product, which really has been built for retail Indian investors, according to the regulations. So you don't really need to know high finance. There are a few basic things if you know, and you use it commonsensically, you can do extremely well. So don't get distracted by people who claim that they have doubled money, tripled money. Those stories will always be there. But a lot of times they're just stories.
Correct. Ma'am, one question has come from Ms. Sejal Gupta. Her question is that if we invest in the fixed deposits, it will not give us good earnings because of inflation. So what is the way out? So right. I trust that debt mutual funds in case one.
That's right. So yes, fixed deposits. So again, if your asset allocation, you're talking of the debt part of it, and fixed deposit is not both inflation and tax friendly, then yes, bond funds are great. And there are, I think, 14 categories of bond funds. So you'll have to choose the one which matches your risk and your tenure. Okay, so there are overnight funds, There are funds that you like, for instance, the overnight fund is called an overnight fund. They are largely for business people who keep money overnight. There are liquid funds. If I want to keep money very liquid for the next 3 months, then I buy that category. For a slightly longer duration, it's ultra short-term debt funds. For a slightly longer, it's short-term debt funds. So you will have to match your holding period to the category of the mutual fund scheme in a bond fund. And SEBI has just come out with a new thing called a riskometer, which is applicable from 1st Jan 2021. That will force mutual funds to label debt funds according to the risk of credit, of duration, of liquidity. So if you really want a low risk bond fund for 3 years, you will be able to see the riskometer, choose the funds that you have selected from that category and see which one doesn't have this credit risk, the risk of low liquidity, and then go for that. But remember, lower risk comes with lower return. So when you're looking at bond fund categories and you see something with a very high return, do check the riskometer and see if if the needle of risk has moved up, because maybe that is not what you want. So yes, definitely go for bond funds, but please take time to understand how to buy a bond fund.
That's right. And on personally also, ma'am, I would like to ask you a question. It's a breaking news for us that you are coming up with a book on mutual funds, first of all. Okay. But ma'am, the book on Let's Talk Money, the Hindi version, when do you feel it's likely to come? And for all the audience over here, I would like to tell you that it was a shock for us, all of us at Banasthali, that on this 14th October, ma'am's mother, respected Mridula ji, passed away. And again, I'm thankful to her that despite that, I asked her even that if you wish, we can shift this webinar to next week. But she was quite committed on this, so kind of that. So ma'am, when the book Hindi version you feel can come?
Thank you. She passed away a week today, which was on 13th, exactly Tuesday
13th.
last. Yes. So I've had the privilege of having my mother translate Let's Talk Money into Hindi. But ironically, we were due for a release just next month. It's just a few weeks later. And she was so delighted in approaching a genre which she had never touched. Finance, again, for women that age was not something that they did. But as she translated Let's Talk Money, she said, I'm understanding Sensex, I'm understanding so many things that I'm reading in the paper now. So yes, Vani Prakashan is the Hindi publisher in association with HarperCollins. And by next month, the Hindi book should be out.
Thanks. If any of the staff members would like to ask any question, they may also ask Pawandeep ji, if you are there.
Namaskar, ma'am.
Namaskar, how are you?
I'm perfectly fine. Actually, whenever I heard you, there's a goosebumps. Actually, it's always a delight. I still remember the day you have delivered your talk in Gyan Mandir. And the moment I come to know that your webinar is happening, and really I'm jotting the dates on calendar to listen to you. It was such an amazing feeling. My thrust area is personal finance only. So I've pursued my research work in financial literacy only. So at that time also, and I'm teaching personal finance also. And you'd be glad to know that this book is always very near to my heart. Whenever I teach to my students, the book I still prefer even for my banking paper also. So I just hope that this webinar goes on and on for the entire day, and I keep on listening. So that's the feeling from my side, and especially what I like is the analogy part. How you compare the food with money. Food habits, then yoga and money. So I start taking on, and I teach the same way to my students also. So that's really Really, we are honored, we are blessed, and just here I want to share you with my personal experience only. As you mentioned that there was a pandemic in March when the stocks are very down. So I have I'm investing in mutual funds since 2008. So this is a March time. This is the first time I thought of reaping out my funds. कि मैं liquidate कर देती हूँ. But you had that Facebook where you have that webinar series. I suppose you remember during March or April on Facebook. So just I'm writing the application and I come across that you're one of the series of webinar and I immediately stopped. Venka, no, Pawan, you're not going to redeem it. And really thanks to you.
That's
And thanks a lot. And all of there are lots and lots of questions, and just I refer to your webinar, your series, and your books, and that will be sorted out, ma'am. Thanks a lot, ma'am.
That is so wonderful to hear. I'm so glad you did not redeem. Markets are up and away. That is fantastic.
Good.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. So, ma'am, with this, so may I allow to deliver a vote of
yes.
thanks?
Yes, please.
Yes, sir. So, ma'am, on behalf of FMS Wisdom, I extend a hearty vote of thanks to our chief guest, Monica ma'am, who spared the time from her busiest schedule to grace this occasion. Today, we are opportunity to hear your thoughts, and this will surely be going to encourage us in our future events. Thank you so much, ma'am. I would also like to thank our Dean sir, student panels, and the entire staff of Vidyapeeth. And last but not the least, our students audience who are attending this event. So, ma'am, before closing, just allow me. There are the few lines which are written by you, and that is my all-time favorite. May I allow to read it?
Please, please.
So whenever I teach this personal finance paper, these are my. I start this lecture with these lines only, which is written by you. That fear, greed, and sudden knee-jerk actions have the potential to derail your carefully constructed money box. You are doing okay if your spending is in control, your borrowing is under control with good loans, you stay away from the periodic investment manias like bitcoins and others, and you continue your SIPs even if market tanks. So this is my whole-time favorite. And
that's really kind of you.
And really, ma'am, thanks a lot. And I'll tell you, I'm the first one to buy your Hindi version.
You're the first one to study what?
I'll the first one to buy your Hindi version.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone in Banasthali, Dr. Purohit, Vandeep, all the girls. I wish you so much luck. Do well. Become rock stars. That's my blessing.
Dhanyavad, ma'am.
Thank you.